Have you ever heard the term silent majority? Have you felt like you could do more? Do you have a desire to help with local politics or make a difference in how the government operates? Is it overwhelming to think about? Those questions define me. They were me, but not anymore. This podcast is about our voice, our questions, our feelings, and working together to make a difference for the future. We believe that we must fight for our liberty or lose our freedoms. Join me as I speak to our friends and neighbors, our politicians and leaders, and discover ways that we all can make a difference in the direction of the United States of America. Hello and welcome to Liberty or Lose. Thanks for tuning in. I just want to take a quick moment to recognize Rush Limbaugh and his passing, the body of work that he represents, who he stood for, what he stood for. I don't think we'll find another personality on radio that will work as hard as Rush had over those years and the amount of work that he had put forth. So thank you, Rush, for your lifelong commitment to the radio airwaves. With that being said, this show is brought to you by Liberty or Lose Apparel. It's time to speak up, be loud, protect our children's future. Ronald Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction." That statement could not feel any more real as it does right now, going into a presidency with the most corruption in the American people I've ever seen. So here's to no more being the silent majority and using our voices through our badass apparel. And that is Liberty or Lose Apparel. You can find it at the .com, and thank you for their support. So this week I am joined by a couple of great gentlemen working in our government here in Montana, and that is John Fuller and Derek Skees. Good morning, guys. How are you both? You're both on mute.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. That's the way a lot of people like the politicians is on mute.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to control that now if you guys start talking too much. Look, I really appreciate you guys jumping on the call today. I heard your show you just did on life and politics with John Fuller. I think people will be thrilled to hear the topics. You were talking about energy and the environment, all those things. So thank you for putting that content out there. John, your show's doing really well. I get a lot of feedback from it these days.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're trying to do what we can to enlighten and have an adult discussion throughout a lot of issues.
Yeah, I like that adult discussion. Derek, would you mind just introducing what you do in the state? I might hack it up or not have all the details, and I certainly would appreciate it.
You bet. No, it's my honor to serve as the representative for House District 11, which is the southwest corner of the incredible Flathead Valley. And in this session, I'm honored to be the chair of House Energy. I'm also the chair of House Rules, and being honored by my peers, I was also elected House Majority Whip.
Wow.
So it's my honor to serve in all those capacities.
Thank you for being there, John. Thank you as well. I'm going to jump right into the questions. People listen to this show because they know that we're answering questions from my friends, neighbors, and local business people. Some are all about the state of Montana and where we're headed, and some have to do with our bigger global government that we're seeing and hearing out of D.C. The first thing I want to ask you about, this doesn't fall in either one of your categories more than likely, but you're living it, is the face mask. We saw last week that the governor dropped the face mask policy, and a lot of people were relieved, although I know they felt that it took a long time for him to get there. We talked about it briefly before, John, about the reasons why and some bills that he wanted to pass beforehand. But what I'm getting pushed back on, for example, is with the local schools. They said, that's great that the governor did that, but now all the weight's on us, and we feel the legal burden to maintain the mask because the health department is pushing it. Derek, what are your thoughts on that, and how can the schools and these businesses feel comfort in the changes, or if they desire to drop the mask mandate?
That's an excellent question. And I think that's one of the most important things we're going to do during the session. We were discussing this on the floor the other day, and I said, I think that this portfolio of bills is the most important, because we need to learn some incredible lessons on the way we mishandled the COVID response. Government doesn't have the authorities to suspend my constitutional rights, period. And that's what many of these things are, is pushing back on that. So we have to work on how we can do that. The first part was to give immunity, or at least set a really high bar so businesses can be protected from litigious individuals that would say, I got COVID in your shop. We had to protect those folks so the businesses wouldn't get wiped out. The second part we got to protect is the schools, for the exact same reason. Somebody could sue a school because their kid got COVID and not even have the proof that my kid got the COVID in the school. And you and I know that if you sue the school, you and I are paying it, not the school. So that's a higher bar, because it's a state immunity, which takes 2/3 vote. And if you do your math, we need a couple Democrats to make that happen. That's a little higher bar, but we're working on that bar. And then a third part of I hate using that three-legged stool, but the third part of the mechanism is we have to also be able to rein in the authority of these local health boards and health officers. The powers that these folks have stem back to the old days of Virginia City and Bannock, when there would be an influenza breakout would go through, and the sheriff may be like, oh, it's not that bad. And then the health officer would say, no, you have to enforce it or we're going to remove you from the sheriff. Those days are behind us. We have such high technology, such great things to do and help slow the spread or even mitigate it once you get it. And so the number one thing we've heard from constituents, at least I can say this for mine, is you cannot allow an unelected bureaucrat to be able to have that kind of authority over us. And so every bill that we're working on, and I think there's about 3 that we've narrowed it down to because there are so many great ideas, it's going to basically say that the health officer is an advisor, and the final choice will be made by either the city councils or because that'll be in Butte, because Butte doesn't really have a county. You know how the city county is the same thing, or the county officials have to answer to the county commissioners. Because if there's no remedy, there's no right. And so if we put it in the hands of the folks that have to get elected by us, then they have to be responsive to us. And so, Jim, that's the complication is one, the elected process in the legislature in Helena is slow. It's like working in molasses. So we're having to fight that. 2, we're trying to make sure we do the right things in code without causing unforeseen consequences. But know that we've been working on this since day one. It's the most important priority to the Republicans that I'm working with in leadership in the House and the Senate. And I know that people want an end to this, and I do too. I think it's horrible, but we got to do it right, and we're working hard to make it right. And I think that's what'll fix the problem for our folks back home.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer. I read the letter from the health department official to the schools, and it was so heavy-handed, and it finished off with a rah, rah, rah. We got to keep pushing. We've got several months left, and I just feel, John, you were a teacher for many, many years. I just feel they're pushing this guilt onto people to follow this mandate, at their will and desire, and who knows what their ulterior motives are. So, John, as a previous teacher, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm on record as saying last March, in fact, March 25th, I published a letter in various newspapers that almost went viral about the fact that we were allowing our liberty and freedoms to be extraordinarily restricted by people that were not responsible to the people. The metaphor, I'm being a teacher, I'm very fond of using metaphors because it helps kids remember stuff. The metaphor is that when you're a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And what we did with the medical authorities, we gave them an unlimited mandate, fix this COVID thing. And so they tried to do so. And I'm not saying that they were there were some sinister motivations. They were given a mandate to do something about COVID, and given that mandate rightly or wrongly. And of course, I'll speak to that in a second. The result was where we have been locked down now for almost a year. And as I tell my constituents over and over again, okay, we for the first time in human history, quarantine healthy people. Think about that. The second thing is that we postponed preventative health care that'll probably cost the lives of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people for their delayed preventative health care that was banned because of COVID protocols. And third, we destroyed our economy. We destroyed it. Thousands of people in Montana have their savings, their incomes, their businesses, not just restricted, but destroyed. And last but not least, of course, we don't really have any objective scientific reason as to why we did all this. Nobody, and we all know that we have been lied to. The public has been lied to. And when you lie to the public in America, if you lie to the public, and I would offer to you that the CDC lied to the American public, as in health boards followed CDC one after another. First, we said that masks weren't necessary. Then they said masks were. And just recently they said, well, now we need double masks. Well, now, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not a medical authority. I'm just a simple old country boy living in Northwest Montana. But what you're telling me is if you need two masks, that means that the one mask that never worked in the first place. So,
and you know what's sad is the mask, according to the CDC, from the very beginning of the year, last year, was only 30% effective, John. So if they doubled the mask to get to 60, guess what's next?
Guys,
we'll have to stop breathing.
Let me tell you, on my other podcast show, I talk about knowing your own truths. And last night I enjoyed one of the great pastimes of Montana. I was at the rodeo. And I looked around. I will tell you, I saw two people with the mask on in the entire rodeo, and that arena was full. It was a father and a son, and I'm 99% sure they were from out of town based on the clothes that they were wearing because it was snowing out, and they were in tennis shoes. I look around at my constituents and how people really feel about the mask. Every Sunday I'm at Sykes Restaurant. That's probably the busiest place in town. Nobody's got a mask in there. So I think that's our real answer, and I hope people start to pay attention.
Jim, you know what? One thing COVID-19 has taught me, and I mean, this is an unalterable lesson that I've learned. Older people are going to die in greater numbers than younger people. Mm-hmm. But I already knew that. I really did.
Derek, I'm going to throw a tough one out to you. This comes from Darlene. She actually lives up in Whitefish. She moved here from New York. What her concern is, and like so many people, I hope, that moved to Montana in recent years, they love the conservative values. They love what Montana stands for. But here they are in places like Whitefish going, this feels a lot like the state I came from. She wants to know, how do we maintain those policies and that conservative nature of Montana and what they fell in love with and why they moved here?
Wow, that's a great question. Asking me as a legislator, I would say it's not government's job to do anything in that arena. But then ask me as a Montana citizen, that's our job as Montana citizens. One of the best parts of the Tea Party movement that happened that came as a result of Barack Obama's 2008 victory and the malaise that settled over the country with the general realization of the failure of socialism is it led to everybody saying, why is my cupboard empty? Why is there no fuel in my snowcats? Why is my prosperity less today than it was yesterday? That lesson led to a ton of people gathering often, asking the tough questions and demanding answers from themselves, from history, and from their politicians. And that was hugely successful. And I have a lot of people ask me, because I wear a little teapot on my lapel, and people say, well, what happened to the Tea Party? Where'd they go? And I said, well, in Montana, they took over the GOP. And so the Tea Party movement teaches us a lot of invaluable lessons. And that is, we need massive engagement from the people, and we need massive education from the people. Because where this fabric of our republic works is when you and I, as voters in the republic, are well informed. Once we're well informed, government can't do the bad things to us. And so it's back to the old adage, we have got to get people involved. What John had said about Reagan, we're one generation away. It's our job to teach our generation and the one right behind us the critical components that we have to maintain in a republic in order to be free. And I know it's difficult and it's hard, and a lot of people are heavily involved in, raising kids and going to work. But yet we have to make it our priority, because when we do, it's the old adage out of the movie The Bug's Life, man, the ants and the grasshoppers. And the grasshoppers would joke and they'd say, hey, man, don't make fun of those ants, because if they figure out the outnumber us 100-1, the game is over. And so I think that's the key to our success, is the general spreading and education to the civic responsibility of the individual in the republic.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
That reminds me of a story that I used to tell all the new teachers, the new beginning teachers, as an old veteran of the educational wars. I would say that there is one thing that you have to absolutely keep secret, and that is don't ever let the students know they outnumber us.
Well, John, you had a recent show for people that don't know what to do next. Your show talks about, as Republicans, what can we do to get involved. So if you haven't heard John's show, Life in Politics, it's a great resource